an insane Toyota scam, and we've got the paperwork as well to show it. Now, a viewer of mine actually had reached out. They took their Toyota Camry in for servicing. Here recently, they do their annual servicing. The check engine or the service light came up on the dashboard, and they were prompted to take their vehicle in to the local service dealership. The vehicle they bought brand new back in 2022, and it was time for the annual service, which generally means that you've got to go through a whole list of items. Toyota has this preset number of checklist items. Because it's at a franchise dealer, they want to check all the features, the tires. Doing a full tire rotation or wheel rotation is part of it. The brake wear and the lining is part of it. Oil, filters, part of it. And of course, checking all the other fluids and the filters, and going through it from top to bottom. It's not a major service, but it is one which means that you're going to try to extend the length and the wear of those tires by rotating them. You're going to check the brake wear. So if there's any problems, you're going to let the customer know that they might have to start thinking about doing something there with that. And the oil change, of course, naturally, Toyota has a bit of an extended oil service, which we don't all necessarily agree with, but nonetheless, suffice it to say, it was time. It was the oil and the filter and so on. Well, the way things go is the vehicle was checked into the dealership. They left the vehicle on the lot for a number of hours, of course, as you would. Most customers they take the car in, they drive it to the dealer, pull up to the service bay, and then hand the keys over and say, thanks. When will it be done? They'll say, well, we'll give you a call, or maybe at the end of the day. And this happened. It was no different. But there was something that did actually happen, and there is something different that happened in this particular visit. Because what actually happened here, as the story goes, is they dropped the vehicle off as normal. The day came, the day went. But as it stands, the customer, the viewer who shared this story with me, was actually sitting for part of the time during, waiting for some of the process, walking around the waiting room or in the general service shop. And they were walking around, and they looked outside and they saw their car, sort of halfway through the day, all of a sudden be driven very hard and very aggressively down the service road in front of the dealership. And I thought, well, that was kind of peculiar. The car even sounded like it was blowing smoke, so it was very cold out. Probably not the best thing to do for a cold engine. But they saw their car fly by, and they could tell by the little dingle dongle that was hanging in the front on the front mirror. Okay, fine. Sometimes mechanics take cars out for a little test drive, make sure everything's working. But really, there wasn't anything out of normal, and so the idea of having to take the vehicle in for just a basic service check generally didn't warrant having to do a road test. I mean, road tests, if there's a weird noise or something strange or something not driving right, that's usually when mechanics take road tests. But why would they take a vehicle out for a road test, post, doing a few basic checks? Well, okay, who are we to judge? So anyway, the day comes and goes. The day finally ends, your car's ready to go, they go and pick up the car. Pay the bill. The bill was something like $130, $140 in Canadian funds. Okay, this is pretty typical, not extraordinarily high. And again, they go through all the items, including even the floor mats, because remember the issue that Toyota had a few years ago with floor mats, how they were locking up in the accelerator pedal, and their sudden acceleration problem became a front page news item. So even that makes the list of items to check. Okay, during that time when they went to pick up the keys, the service writer said, well, we don't have anything in terms of paperwork. We'll give you this handwritten item instead. So they gave them a handwritten list of sort of some of the basic items that had been done. They said, the service is done 100%. And the only thing they didn't do was rotate the tires. So we asked the question, why wouldn't you rotate the tires? It's part of that standard check. Well, they said it didn't need to be done. Okay. We didn't really know better, but we thought we're paying for that service. Why wouldn't they do it? It's all included in that standard checklist that you normally get. And Toyota says part of that is rotating the tires and checking the brake wear. Okay, fine. They said it didn't need doing, which we sort of thought was peculiar. They got this written version of what looks to be a bit of a service write-up from, the mechanics. And so what ended up happening was they said the front brakes were 10 millimeter, the rear brakes were 8 millimeters. The tires didn't need to be rotated. It wasn't asked any further. It didn't push the issue other than they said that they would get the paperwork, the final copy, once their program was working, because apparently their service program system wasn't working. And this Just happened a month ago. I know we had this bit of an outage. Remember about a year ago, there were some issues with a lot of dealers dealing with these shutdowns on their service programs, and some of that was a problem here earlier in the year, but there was no news of that being an issue here as of recent. So got the paperwork, the scribbled notes basically saying everything's good, your brakes are 10 and 8 respectively, and you should be good to go. Well, first of all, these are steely wheels. I just want to paint the picture for you. Steely wheels. In other words, they just have those little perforated holes or black, because they're winter wheels that were put on the vehicle for the winter. And so you could not actually physically really see the brakes very well. Other than through the hole, you could take a peekaboo through there, but there's no real ways to check the brakes. So the more we thought about it, we drove away, said the brakes are 10 and 8. So we started asking the question. Even, the customer started thinking, how do you check the brakes? How is that done without pulling off the wheels? But then they said they didn't rotate the wheels, but then they're saying the brake wear is 10 and 8. So, right, more questions, more concerns. So then, lo and behold, the decision was constantly chasing the dealer. Said the next day, the next day, the next day. This went on for about a week, trying to reach out to the dealer to get the final hard copy. Because as we all know, when you take your vehicle into the shop, it's never happened if it's not on paper. Like they say, if it's not written down, it just never happened. And we all know that. So you have to ask these questions of the dealers. When you take your vehicle in for service, it's such an absolute must-have. Also, never, ever, ever allow them to change parts on your car unless you have that conversation. They ask and beg for forgiveness on the front end, and always ask for the old part back, because there's a lot of shady practice. Now, here goes the story. The story goes, this individual, the viewer, had pulled out some paperwork from a year earlier, okay? The service paperwork from a year earlier. And that paperwork stated that the brakes had brake wear of 9 millimeters on the front, 8 millimeters on the front and 7 millimeters on the back. So it was actually, it had less brake wear last year than it did this year. When I heard about this, I had this conversation with the viewer that reached out about this. I said, what is this, regenerative braking? It regenerates itself, it grows, it builds brake wear? No, that's absolutely ludicrous. So now it begs the question. There was more brake wear left this year, and they actually wrote those numbers down and they said everything was fine, and yet they didn't change the wheels to do a rotation check. It was just all adding up to be a mess. Then we started looking under the hood. And the viewer said, look, I'd looked underneath. The filler cap looked really dirty and dusty, not fresh oil film like you might have on a greasy glove, but instead it was dust from dust getting into the engine compartment, and it doesn't even look like it was really tampered. So, clearly it wasn't stated, look, we're not implying that the oil service was never done, but it really does make a person think. And so finally, the service manager reaches out, asks us what the concerns. Then, of course, that was all clarified. Said, look, this was not this was not good. This is what happened. You're saying the brakes had this, but in actuality, it even had less last year. How does that make any sense? Please explain. Was the oil change even done? Was any of this service done? I just paid $130, $140. And was any of this done? Was any of this work really done? And so it's bad enough a lot of the dealers are pulling shady practices. We're seeing it all over the place, both on selling of new, selling on used, spray painting bad seats, dirty carpet, putting, essentially lipstick on a pig and still ultimately a pig. But there's a lot of shady practices. That's why a lot of people shy away from dealing with dealers. Now, there's a lot of great dealers, and I've dealt with many dealers that are upfront, they're professional, and they're as clear and transparent as you could possibly expect. Lots of them. And I would say the vast majority of them by my experience. But the problem is you don't know by driving up to the dealership. It's a franchise name on it, and you don't always know which ones are maybe playing below the level, riding the low road, so to speak. And so after some numerous conversations and some tough emails that went back and forth, the manager said, look, there's no way to even explain this. We don't know how to explain this. We don't even want to try to explain this. Not sure what happened. We'll have to talk to the tech who had their fingers on the car. At the end of the day, the manager said in good faith, look, we'll bring your car in. We'll have a certified journeyman go from top to bottom on this car, have a look at, make sure everything gets done properly and you get a full proper service done. So this now, of course, meant another visit to the dealership where the dealer actually took and in good faith went through the vehicle ultimately again. Now, we're not here to suggest, and certainly the viewer was not there to suggest that none of the work was done, but how would you know? If, on one side and the other side, there's certainly discrepancies about brake wear and tire rotations, and you're paying for services you didn't get, it really starts making and begging the question, was any of this work actually done? See, scams like this are happening to unsuspecting buyers and viewers like yourself every single day. And while it may not sound like the most serious issue, it's bad enough with a lot of these dealers now are extending oil services. We know Toyota, we know BMW, a lot of these manufacturers are extending the oil services, saying, look, we're using synthetics, we're using these better products. You don't need to change your oil as often. We all know best practice is still 3,000 to 5,000 miles. So what happens if you have an extended oil service interval that looks like 12, 13, 15,000 kilometers, or maybe 8 to 10,000 miles, and then they skip that, and then they reset the service tender, and then all of a sudden now you've got a 30,000 or a 20,000 mile service interval? Clearly not doing your engine any good, and clearly makes you wonder what's actually being done. The whole idea of trust when you take your expensive vehicle, and we're not even talking about a Porsche. I mean, we're talking Toyotas and Hondas. It could be Kias, and it could be anything, a Ford or a General Motors product. It doesn't matter. To each and every one of us, we work very hard. The cost of living crisis often pushes people to buy as much as they can and to spend as much as we do on these vehicles and not getting the appropriate treatment, especially when we're paying for this. It's just absolute insult to injury. But there's so many scams going on these days, and I just wanted to share this because this particular viewer was very passionate about this. They spent a lot of money on this brand new Camry, brand new, and we're very disappointed to see some of this practice being played. And so I just want to share that story, that scam. This is not unique. This is one of many thousands of people across North America that's being screwed as we speak. So definitely ask the questions, do those checks. If you can have a look at the filter housing, there's little tips and tricks. Maybe look at the oil filter housing. Maybe check your dipstick before and after. Maybe put a little mark on that oil filter housing, especially if it's a canister style. Do those little checks. They say they did an air filter. Maybe pop the housing. Have a look. I hate to say that we have to get to the resort to start second guessing. But if you ever find yourself in a position where you found a dealer or a shop of any sort saying that they've done the work and realizing, of course, that they didn't, I mean, there's all kinds of recourse around that, but more importantly, you've just blown the trust. And ideally, you just want to look for another shop that you can trust. It's hard, it's few and far between. When you find a mechanic and a service bay or a service shop that you can trust, they're worth their weight in gold. And I just want to share this latest scam that's starting to hit. There's no question, it happens each and every day to people paying for products and services that they didn't get. But we should all be more aware of it, more savvy. Ask for those used parts that got swapped out. Take a look at some of the things that they said they did. Verify it for yourself with your own eyes. And again, as always, everybody, be sure to check out, where do those brand new cars go that never sell? Yeah, right there. Check that one out. And again, what's going on with Ford? Oh, a whole new host of problems there too. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel too. Hope to see you all real soon. Bye-bye.